Welcome back. Thanks for joining us, Joyce. Before we jump in, just like again, a reminder, there's floor on Monday. At 1, I believe. There's definitely an email from the speaker telling you vividly. And we are going to meet at 11 on Monday. At 11. Wow. Yes. Very excited. We're really going to like round out this hopefully final week in a serious way.
I think it will be the final week.
I
just did something.
Everybody. And then folks were asking for sort of a refresher on how the numbers all fit together in this delightful bill of S56. And so Joyce is gonna take us through the spending side with some examples, and then we're gonna look at that 7-year timeline again, and Pat's gonna finish it out. We just have it until 2, and then we're gonna finish another bill. But I promise none of this is new information. Floor's yours, Joyce. Thanks.
Sure, I know. Okay. Thank you. I'm Joyce Manchester with the Joint Fiscal Office, and I am pulling up Excellent. Thank you very much. So, the chair suggested that it might be helpful to look at example families who have children enrolled in the CFAP program. So, she asked for sentences. And of course, I had to set up a spreadsheet first in order to write a sentence. Sorry. I know.
You wrote me that last night, I did like laugh out. It's all weird.
Well, it's complicated. So it's complicated for everyone to think about. So here is my spreadsheet. If you don't like looking at a spreadsheet, please read the words. But I'm going to start with the blue family, that is family A. And the example here is that they have one child, age 1, and income of $25,000. They send their child to an early care center for full-time care. So you'll remember that CCFAP chart tells me how much the full-time reimbursement is at an early care center. And I'm assuming that everything is at the 5-star rate because I couldn't get in my head how to show 2-star moving to 5-star, blah, blah, blah. So all of these centers and home-based care providers are at the 5-star rate.
So are you assuming that they're like W-2 wage earners?
Yes, they are eligible. Yes, thank you. So under current law, their family CCFAP copay is $0 per week. Let's stick with current law. The CCFAP reimbursement to the child care center in this case would be $349 for a full-time infant under current law. And the total payment to the center in this case is $349 because the family has no copay. Okay, and now we can see what happens under S56 as recommended by the Human Services Committee. So you can see the child is still 1 year old. They're still at the early care center. Their copay is still $0, right? They're still below the 150% FPL level. Under the new reimbursement rates, remember, increased 38.5%. The CCFAP reimbursement to that center for the same child is now $483. The total payment to the center is $483. So the center is getting $134 more per week. And the expectation is that they will use the extra money mostly for wages, support higher wages and benefits for their staff, and also perhaps for renovations, physical capacity, and so forth. Good.
Joyce, I just want to try to remember here, and that bump up in the
reimbursement,
to the center is based on that percentage.
38.5%,
And then
right?
and it was a little slightly different for home care. Centers, it was a little bit more, right?
We're going to look at the home care in just a moment.
Okay, yeah.
Another,
Just wanted-
Two slides
just wanted to
forward.
be sure I had that.
Yes.
For that correctly.
yes. So this is the Blue family. So we understand the Blue family. And I don't mean to imply that they are sad because they are blue. It just happens to be a Blue family.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, and now this is still center-based care. And this is the very same bit of a spreadsheet that you saw before, but I'm going to be talking about the Green family, which happens to be family C. The Green family has one child, age 2, income of $75,000. So now they have a copay. Their FPL is over 300%. So they have a copay of $150 per week. Under current law, CCFAP would pay the provider, the center, $178 per week, adding up to the full-time, full payment amount of $328 per week. Okay. And now if we move to the S56 Human Services world, the copay for the family goes up to $189. That's because the weekly copay goes from multiples of $25 to multiples of $27. That adds up as you move up the income scale. So the family copay is $189. The CCFAP reimbursement is $261. So quite a big increase there. And the total paid to the center is now $450 per week, or an increase of $122 per week. Okay.
So it's not, so there's a increase for the family, but it's not as if the increase doesn't go anywhere. It's part of a much larger increase
Yes.
for the wages for the folks who are doing work in this particular case.
Yes. All right, and now we'll move to the yellow family, family D. They have income of $125,000, so they're above 350% FPL, and they are not eligible for the CCFAP subsidy program under current law. They have 2 children who are ages 3 and 7. I'm assuming the 3-year-old is enrolled full-time at an early care provider center. The 7-year-old is part-time. He or she is in school and goes to a center part-time after school. So they are not eligible under current law. They have no CCFAP reimbursement on their behalf going to the provider, and they are paying, whoa, what just happened? No. And they are paying the full cost themselves. Okay, and I don't know what that full cost is. It's likely somewhat bigger than the reimbursement rate, but I don't know it. Okay. So under the new system, S56, according to Human Services, that 417% of FPL would be eligible. Remember, the eligibility goes all the way up to 550%. So their family CCFAP copay would be $297 per week. The CCFAP reimbursement on their behalf for the 2 children would be $362. So that's a combination of the full-time 3-year-old and the part-time 7-year-old. And the total payment to the centers would be $659. Okay, and that's probably not terribly far off. Well, I can't say that because I don't know what the center was charging previously. Could be more. Okay. Any questions about those examples at the centers?
I just have to put my asterisk on all of this, because it's clearly isn't. Things that won't be like a dead horse. It works super straightforward this way to provide a full certificate for kids if everyone is a full-time employee working 40 hours. If any of the pairs is a self-employed person who earns under $27,000, the family would not be eligible for a full-time certificate. And so family A was two self-employed individuals who made up that $25,000, they would be eligible for a CCFAP subsidy and no co-payment, but they might not be awarded a full-time certificate for their kids. So they might not have to pay, but they might not get 40 hours a week for their kid covered because of the current approach to take the self-employed income monthly and divide it by 4.3 and then minimum wage to determine the number of hours of care you're eligible for. So it looks so great. And yet, for self-employed folks, you are not necessarily eligible for these benefits at this rate for full-time.
And the horse is somewhat dead. And we have a language in the bill, in our amendments to begin the process to correct that, along with a lot of other types of Vermonters who are sort of on the periphery of eligibility. Any chart questions, thoughts?
Okay, good. We'll move on to the home-based care.
And this is my shorthand. Home-based care really means family child care home, FCCH.
I'm using shorthand, home-based care. But they are licensed, right? They are eligible to receive CCFAP reimbursements and so forth. Okay, so now I've highlighted family B, who is the orange family, maybe slightly orange family. They have income of $50,000 per year. That puts them in the FPL level of 167%. So they certainly are eligible, assuming other things work out. They are eligible for CCFAP. They have children who are 1 and 4 years of age, both in full-time care, and this time at a family home-based care provider. Under current law, they're right above the 150% level, so their weekly copay is $25. The CCFAP reimbursement to the home-based provider is $410 for both children. The total payment to the home-based provider is $435 per week. You can see under S56, according to Human Services, the weekly copay goes up to $27 per week for this family, 2 kids, 1 family payment. The CCFAP reimbursement goes up significantly to $740 for the 2 children. The total paid to the provider goes up significantly to $767 per week, and that's an increase of $332. So a significant bump up in that case. Any questions about all that?
Yes.
Can you go back a little bit to can you tell me what the 7-year-old is getting? Is that after school care or?
Yes, it's after school care, part-time. Yes.
Part-time after school or summer?
I priced it out at part-time care because that would be most of the year. Yes. So the CCFAP rate currently is part-time $110, but that would be increased by 38.5%, and then we would close half the gap between the home-based care and the center. It would be even higher than that. Good, shall we continue? Okay, now I have ready for your enjoyment the same shark tooth pictures that you've seen before, and I'm happy.
Call it sawtooth though.
I'm sorry.
No, you're welcome to call it shark.
Sawtooth, yes, some people call them shark. Okay, I think sawtooth is more appropriate. So I can walk through those, and I wonder where I should start. I have included here the status quo for current law, which you have seen before, and you can see the spike at 350%, and that's the spike that we're trying to smooth out by continuing eligibility. Does anyone want to ask questions about that one? Shall we keep going? Okay, this is as passed by the Senate. So this is the $25 weekly copay multiples and 0 copay up to 185% of the FPL. And this is.
Let's go to the House.
Yep.
version of this.
Yep. Okay, and here's the human services changes. So they start the family payments at $27 per week at 150% of FPL as in current law. Well, the 150% is as of current law. They did increase the payment from $25 to $27 per week. Okay, and the CCFAP reimbursements continue up to 550% of FPL. That's where the family copay and the charge for the care overlap. So it doesn't make sense to apply for CCFAP after that point. And so here is the picture where you can see household size of 3 is the darker green line. Household size of 4 is the lighter green line. The reason is that you can see down below here, suppose you're at 300% of FPL, that would be almost $75,000 if you're a family of 3. If you're a family of 4, you're allowed more income because it costs more to maintain a family of 4. So 300% of FPL is at $90,000 for a family of 4. And you can see this cuts off at 550% of FPL. And at that point, the family would be paying the full cost on their own. Yes.
Joyce, wouldn't, for the household size of 4, assuming, 2 parents and 2 children, wouldn't that, after that last sawtooth at 14.7%, wouldn't that graph actually jump way up? Because when you have 2 kids,
If they're
your copay.
Absolutely right. And I have a chart.
I'm getting ahead of
Perhaps.
myself. Okay.
Perhaps it's included here. We'll find out. But you're absolutely right. If there are 2 children in care, that line shoots up. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Anything else? Good. Okay, and this is talking about closing the gap by 50% between the family-based, home-based care and the center-based care. I think you all understand what's going on there. Okay, this is the issue of siblings. I don't know whether this is going to be taken up this time around or not. The Senate has been mulling this over for several months. It's complicated to implement. It might make sense from a policy point of view, but you have to weigh the policy against the feasibility and so forth. So
The bill we have in front of us right now has the same. Yes.
does not deal with the sibling issue. We did find out today, interesting numbers from CDD saying that 37% of families in CCFAP currently have 2 or more children in CCFAP. So that gives us something to work with.
Say 30%.
37%. Yes, and there it is.
Got ahead of myself.
There it is. So this was my attempt to show what happens when a family of 3 becomes a family of 4, because they've added a child to the CCFAP system. So I first thought it was pretty interesting that a family at 700% of FPL with a household size of 3 would be ineligible for CCFAP. They would be paying full freight for both children. However,
And this is current. I know we've seen this like a million times, but this is current or proposed.
this is 185. This is the Senate. Yes, this is the Senate with $25 per week multiples. Yes, 185% is my clue. Okay, so they're not eligible if they're at 700% as a family of 3, but 174 moves down below the eligibility line so that when they become a family of 4 with 2 children in CCFAP, they are eligible, meaning they pay 1 family copay and both children.
And that's really sort of a function of just the way the federal poverty level calculations work, right?
It is, but it's also a policy decision. Until July of last year, there was a per child charge for CCFAP, and that was changed by legislative decision. Yeah, just took many years to implement, 4 or 5 years to implement, and it was implemented on a new system that is now set up for the per family payment, and so to change that new system to a per child payment would mean more time, effort, et cetera. So that's a challenge. if you think about a family at something less than 400%, just under 400%, as a family of three, they would become a family of four at 328%, something like this. And so you can see that their family copay drops because they're in that lower FPL group. And they would have the second child paid for entirely by CCFAP.
And so I feel like the big takeaways here for us in terms of why we're raising revenue is that more families are going to be eligible for CCFAP. Some families are going to have much lower copays, and centers will be getting a lot more money.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So,
Centers broadly, people who provide care for children. Yes.
so Joyce, if I was a family of three earning 174,000, I'd be paying 28% of my income on childcare.
Yes.
And then if I switch, I have a child that same time period, making the same amount of money, I would then be eligible for CCFAP. So if my employer said to me when I had one kid, and I have a second one, they say, hey, we want to give you a $10,000 raise, I should actually decline
No,
my
thank you.
raise or put it into benefits or something that doesn't show, therefore I hang on to my CCFAP because it goes from 28% down to 12.5%.
Yes.
Hmm.
And the consequences of
Yeah,
policy, right?
that's worrisome.
Well, I mean, I think, well, Joyce, I feel like you could talk about this.
Well,
They all, I mean, basically every program, every tax credit, everything we do has some spot where except for public school, but almost everything we do has some spot where it stops making sense. And then there's always this like really deep trough where you're actually worse off if you make a little bit more money.
Yes, and this is behind the Senate thinking that maybe
families above a certain level, maybe above the 350% level, should pay something for the second child, which would maybe put you up halfway from where you were before to where you are now, right? But that comes with feasibility issues, implementation issues. And, you know, it might be the right policy, and maybe it's the right policy 3 years down the line or something, once you can sort of work out the glitches. But that's for you all to decide. My job is to show you what it means.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
okay.
It's a good illustration.
I like it. I was very excited about this chart. No more Snickers.
I'm sorry, you and I are just not the same. I like your charts though.
Okay, some people have been asking for dollar amounts paid per family and by CCFAP.
Do you have a version of this as well?
I do not. I have not updated this. I have
Amazing.
been doing other things, yes. Yes, I apologize. This is as passed by the Senate, so this is still the $25 starting at 185% of FPL. But
It's still a ballpark.
it's in the ballpark, and you get the idea that you're moving up in terms of the family payment, and the CCFAP payment is moving down at the same time. So that's there just for your interest. You've seen this before in case you need to look up the CCFAP capped rates. So these are maximum rates that CCFAP pays to providers. And you can look at the differences among full-time, part-time, center-based care, home-based care, and so forth.
This is current law.
This is current law.
Represent.
If you were to go back 2 slides to this one, and then you look at what people making 149, 174, 198 are going to be paying in increased income taxes plus what they're going to be paying for childcare.
We have not done that.
Something like that.
We have not done that. I think you could get there. I mean, we could get there given time. Pat has some very nice charts showing the effect by income category, how much more each level might be paying. And we could certainly figure out how much more or less families would be paying for childcare. We have not done it.
How come the jump is so big on this one, but it's not on the previous ones? I'm just so confused too.
Oh, because I'm assuming there's a second child involved. So
So
once,
like, the previous sawtooths, we've like
Yes.
corrected so that it's smooth.
yes, for one child. For one child, right?
Okay.
So as soon as you are no longer, well, as soon as your income says you are not eligible for CCFAP, here I'm assuming 2 children. And so all of a sudden, you're paying full cost for 2 children.
And it makes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Good. Okay. Good, it's only 1:30. Excellent. Should I keep going to the 7
Yeah,
years?
7 year would be great, thank you.
Okay, let me pull that up.
So we've looked at this before, but it was maybe a week ago, I don't know, when it was time, sorry. I don't know how many times a week I say that. But someone yesterday asked to take a look at it, again, so I think it's sort of helpful to refresh us on why and how we're raising money. Again, FY '24 is covered by the budget because we have a lot of unexpected revenue this year that we're able to do it in FY '24, but all projections from the economists, we're not gonna have that level of unexpected revenue, so to maintain the system, we're gonna need to raise new revenue in FY '25, and that's why we're all still sitting here talking about development.
Good. So, thank you for that introduction. This is preliminary estimates of what it might look like over 7 years if the 38.5%, et cetera, goes into effect. This is based on the Human Services version of the bill. $27 copay. That doesn't change over time. We're closing half the gap between centers and home-based care. We're looking at moving halfway to the RAND cost of high-quality care initially and then eventually bumping up. So you can see, maybe we should start with that. I'm showing the progress to high-quality accessible care. So we're at about halfway, 50% loosely interpreted is about halfway. And we're staying there until FY '28. So this would be the year after public pre-K is implemented.
But can I just
Sure.
clarify? So the rate increases in the bill
Yes,
themselves
are
are
only-
actualized in the bill.
Yes.
Where does sort of the bill's language on spending end?
So what the bill says is that the rate would increase, the reimbursement rate would increase January 1st, 2024. So that's FY '24. I'm counting 5 months because in fact, the payments from CCFAP go out the door in the next month, right? So the January payment would go out the door in February. So you'd only have February, March, April, May, June. In FY '24, 5 months. FY '25 would be 12 months, so that's a full year cost. We are increasing those rates by inflation, but only by inflation, right? So the idea is that we're keeping up with inflation to stay at about 50% of the way to the RAND high quality cost, but nothing more than that. And that is true. You can see we're barely increasing all the way through FY '27. And then the intent, I don't know. The idea in this chart is that at some future year, maybe it's FY '28, we would move up another quarter of the way. So we'd be at 75% of the way. And then at some other point, maybe FY '29, we would move up to 100%. But that is not stated, right? That's not
Actioned.
absolutely.
Joyce, do you need to go?
So I've been given reprieve. I can leave at about 10 of 2.
Oh, okay, great,
No,
okay,
great.
so Pat can take over the revenue side of it.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So this does not include the potential deputy secretary or other administration person in the future?
No, it does not. I'm not.
That was. Yeah.
In the bill.
Okay. Okay, so just to go down the chart a little bit, we have the 0 to 4 rate and eligibility expansion that starts January 1st, 2024, 5 months, and then we move into the full year. We have the school age rate and enrollment expansion that also starts January 1st, 2024, and again, it's 5 months and then the full year. We have some money going to CDD for administrative work, both internally and perhaps a contract to help them deal with increased enrollment and getting money out the door to the providers and so forth. We have readiness payments for current providers, as well as payments for new entrants into the provider side of the market, $18.9 million. In FY25, we have about $10 million in quality incentive and capacity payments. So you remember that that would go to providers who either move up in terms of their star rating or who stay at the 5-star rating. Okay, so this is a way to incentivize higher quality, even though we're paying everybody at the 5-star rating. We have a pre-K implementation committee that would receive per diems, and they would be able to hire a contractor to help them answer questions. They operate full-time in FY24 and then for 6 months in FY25. So we come up with the estimated appropriation of about 72 million, not quite 72 million in FY24, and a little over 135 million in FY25. And we're using one-time money on the House side, one-time money of 21.7 million, as well as base general funds of 50 million. And so we come out balance for FY24. Yes, I know I'm off by $1. I decided to ignore the dollar.
Wise.
Yes. It was difficult, but I did it. Okay. And in FY25, this is showing needed new funding of 85.5 million. Also on this chart, although it's not set in stone, is the amount that JFO is estimating for public pre-K if it were to be implemented in FY27. Now this, I should mention this. This is for 4-year-olds only, and House Education redefined pre-K to include both 3 and 4. So their public pre-K would include both 3 and 4-year-olds. So at some point, if that sticks, JFO needs, that's us, we need to update both this public pre-K estimated amount and the CCFAP offset to include both the 3 and 4-year-olds.
I mean, what are you using as like the cost per pupil for pre-K?
So this is Julia's estimate, and she worked with AOE to come to this, and so I can't answer that question.
Based on the wide variety or?
Julia is really, Julia's the best person.
Yes, it is full day, full week.
Couldn't be penalized it's kindergarten.
More questions about the spending side of this 7-year chart?
Chart. Thank you.
Good. Pat, do you have this so you can put it up? Okay, excellent. I will stop sharing.
It just, I think everything that's in the bill is there, and some of it is firmly in the bill, and some of it is like intent. And that's like sort of a green line.
FY27 is the line where we're moving to intent.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks very much. And I'm sorry I have to leave.
No, I really appreciate you being able to be here.
Hello, everyone. So Patrick Titterton, Joint Fiscal Office. Bill has the unique distinction of, I feel like this happens with the lawyers a lot, where they have multiple lawyers working off, they have different sections of the same piece of paper. But here we have multiple analysts working off of the same table.
Just to agree on the date.
Exactly. But it says the first half and I have the second. So is that large enough for everyone to see? No? Honest. What's that?
That's great.
Okay. So this is what Joyce was just showing you all. I'm just working on minimizing all these pop-ups from Zoom. Great. So if we just come down here, we see, I have been talking with all of you about and how that sort of overlays with the cost that Joyce is projecting over the 7-year term. So of course, there's that phase in as you work towards 100% implementation. So we need to be thinking about what do we need right away and how is that going to compare in the out years, just to make sure that sort of the dollars and cents that we're looking at coming in are sufficient to cover what's going out. So just as a refresher, we looked at the personal income tax rate increases, and those are going up to 3.65, 7.3, 8.3, and 9.6. There are the corporate income tax rate increases. That's by 0.5%, 1%, and 1.5%. There's the expansion of the EITC. And then I don't know if this was meant to be the primary source of funding for this bill, but there is the salt cap workaround, which does have some positive revenue implications. So I've included that here. Yeah.
Just to clarify, is that the 90 or the 87? For the
Oh, Ted hasn't actually come in to talk to us about this yet, but the who work on
Oh, the credit rate?
the credit. No, it's there are some slight differences that I don't know if he's updated in this table because when we expand the original SALT estimates that he did were based on existing income tax rates, not the new income. I don't know if that got updated.
So Ted and I have touched base about that. His take on this is that even with those changes, we're still pretty much in the right ballpark here with the 1.7. There may be sort of I think he has in a table somewhere that I saw indeterminate increase or decrease, but still that sort of anchor point that we have here with the 1.7 is appropriate for our purposes right now. And again, you see here it's sunsetting in fiscal year 26, so we have that being cut off at that point. So as Joyce was just showing you all, there's this point where you have 50%, and that's sort of what we're moving to right away. And it increases in fiscal year 20. It'd be nice if I had the fiscal year's headers down here too. But in fiscal year 28, that's when we're moving to 75, and then eventually further down the line, we're going to 100. So if you remember, this was sort of a small piece in the presentation I showed all of you, but there is sort of that supplemental increase that you have to bring about to cover those increased costs in the later years as you move towards the full implementation. And, just like sort of Joyce's increasing sort of steadily inflation over years, we're using the assumption that we're going to sort of see the general increase in revenues from this source. Each year we'll sort of get together when we have the consensus forecast from the economists. So, even what their take on where they see revenues going, that should sort of illustrate a little bit how much exactly we can expect in each of those out years. So the cells that I have highlighted in yellow there, at the very top under the PI change, those correspond with that supplemental increase, which we would see effective for tax year 27 and affecting fiscal year 28 revenues, right? Because the tax year and the fiscal year don't really run on the same schedule. So I think I'll pause there because I know this is just a different way of looking at stuff that we've already talked about. Just see if there are any refresher questions or just how I'm showing things here that maybe don't make sense.
So just looking at the bottom of the summary, difference between revenues and costs. That's assuming after FY '24, there's still gonna be that $50 million general fund base funding up above on 14 from the house. I see 50 million goes all the way across.
Yep. So that would be inclusive of that base funding, right?
So in a sense, we can kind of think of that maybe going away, utilizing it for something else since we don't need that money. So if we keep cruising across, it gets up to 62 and then it drops in 29, which I'm getting way out ahead of our skis here. But in a sense, in 29, if this goes all to plan, in that 50 million goes away, we would actually have to add back 45 million to be able to cover.
We're looking pretty far out into the future, but as it's sort of presented here,
Yeah.
I think your thinking is right. Yeah. Depends on how we're doing with revenues, right?
Yeah. So. Just thinking out loud, I think we can soften that corporate income tax if we're gonna end with 47 million on the bottom line after putting 50 million, assuming that we're putting that in, instead of doing one bulk swoop for the 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%. Corporate income tax bracket increase.
So the corporate income portion is roughly about 20 million of it. So it wouldn't be I guess in theory, if you went it out entirely, it still would result in that sort of net positive result here.
Or did a step, a 0.25%, 0.5%, 0.75%. And in FY '28, increase it again, kind of like with personal income tax. So there's a step there instead of just going right at it.
And yes, and the wiggle part in here that I think we're not, that Scott brought up, yesterday or something, was, the pre-K. We're not including the idea of the new revenue source for pre-K, that we're including. And so right now that would just sit in the ed fund, which I imagine is not viable as an option. It's just not something, it's not gonna become. It'll need to be dealt with in the future, I guess what I'm saying.
But when that hits, it still has, that's FY '27, there's still 53 million on the bottom line based on.
Yeah.
But again, we have to assume that there's gonna be a $50 million base budget general fund. Just
No, you agree, it's all, yeah.
But it's nice to see it all in one table, that all the things in the bill and the revenue, in some theoretical sense, cover the full cost of care at the outset here, that this is a package for transformational change that lines up with the asterisks around the ed fund.
Sure. I'll just throw out, I know there were some questions about sort of the average and effective tax rate changes yesterday. I did yesterday as follow-up send Sorcia some tables, which I think she may have shared. So if there were any questions around that, I'd be happy to address that now while you have me.
Anyone? I think we've actually talked about this enough.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Feels brilliant. Okay. So Katie is making a few little tweaks to language based on things we talked about yesterday, along with Beth and Damien. And we'll pick it up again on Monday. Thanks, Pat.
I'm good, how are you?
Is it going? back to S-115. What's this morning's bill? With Michael O'Grady.
Fees. Does everyone?
Does anyone have anything to say, or does anyone want to make a motion?
I think we're,
Carolyn, you ready to go? Yes.
I appreciate that the whole committee waited for me and I'm ready.
Okay, thanks.
I'm happy to make the motion. I move that we approve the bill as presented to us by Mike O'Grady this morning.
Thank you. So Representative Brannigan moved that we found S-115 favorable as amended by House Agriculture, Food Resiliency and Forestry. Did I get that done? Yes, great.
Right, and to be clear, it's the House Agriculture version, not the Senate version.
Yes.
They're very different.
And Representative Sims seconded. Any discussion? Okay, you could call the roll, please. Clerk, that is, could you call the roll? Thanks.
Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demrow,
Yes.
Maslin,
Yep.
Meadows,
Yep.
Bodie. Yes. Sims,
Yes.
Taylor,
No.
Canfield,
Yes.
Kornheiser.
Yes.
11-1-0.
Thank you. Do you want to report that?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
great. I'm ready to report it. And we're going to take a break